Hey everybody. All right, while I set up here, this will be the first time I ever do a speech on a bike, so we're trying new things. Let's ground ourselves with some gratitude. I just want to say thanks to Creative Mornings Chicago, Creative Mornings Indy for the amazing experience so far. This is really cool. I get to do this. None of us get here alone, so just want to thank my community, thank Edge Athlete Lounge for letting me use this space, and for all of the amazing community that I find here, feeling like I belong. And of course, thanks to my partner, Jen, because everything. All right. For years, I carried my secret with me. My friends, my family didn't know. Even the person that I slept next to had no idea. I would sneak out of my house every, once a week or so with a big bag of clothes and items. And I would get changed. And for that hour or 2 hours, I would feel like I could really be myself. I felt like I could be fully immersed in the moment, like my worries went away, and I could really be me. And then I'd have to change back into the person that people thought that I was and return to my daily life. It's exhausting. I remember the fear and the worry and the nervousness that I would carry around with me, thinking that somebody might find out. My mission every day was to hide. I was obsessed with hiding. Wondered if in conversations, if something I said would tip somebody off or let them know that there was more to me than what they knew. Probably more to me than they could ever imagine. I received a lot of messages when I was a kid that who I was wrong, or that I wasn't real. But the truth is, in those years, I never smiled bigger than when I was behind that mask. I got to hide in plain sight. I smiled the biggest when no one could actually see my face. So in a lot of ways, my experience as Wildcat Willie mirrors, or maybe foreshadows, the rest of my life. I didn't know I was transgender in college when I was hiding my identity as the mascot of Northern Michigan University. But I did know that I was having this growing discomfort with not really who I was, but how the world saw me and how the world interacted with me. As a 3-sport all-conference athlete in high school, I didn't envision that I would be the college mascot. But I gave up on my dreams to be a basketball player before they even started. At the time, I made a lot of excuses. I said I was a first-generation college student, and so I really had to focus on my academics to make it worth it to go to school. And I was paying for college on my own, so I had to have jobs, and I didn't think I could pay for school and be an athlete at the same time. I also of the generation of Saved by the Bell. And so I really wanted that rich Saved by the Bell experience, clubs and organizations. And so I said, I don't think I can do that and play basketball. But in reality, I was making a lot of excuses. In reality, I just couldn't bring myself to join a women's team. I grew up raised and socialized as female, playing girls and women's sports, but I didn't know I was queer or trans at the time. I didn't even really fully know what those things meant, to be honest, which is a little embarrassing to say now, but at the time, you don't know what you don't know. And what I did know was that I was struggling to relate to others. And I think more of it was that others were struggling to relate to me. As a kid, I found my sense of self, my confidence, my friends, and my family through playing sports. And from the youngest that I can remember, being a part of teams was incredibly important to me because it's where I felt like I fit in. It's where I felt like I belonged. I think my teammates loved and respected me because I was a good athlete, because I was a great teammate, and because I was a great leader. And it didn't really matter what they thought of me outside of sports. When I was a part of the team, I was a part of the team. But off the court or the field, it was a different story. I didn't really fit in with other girls in my class, and that was pretty clear. But I also had a strong sense that I wasn't quite like my brother, so I just always felt like me. Leading up to today, I've been introduced to you as the first trans athlete sponsored by Nike, as the first trans man to make Team USA, as someone who has broken barriers and changed sports. But as a kid, I never would have dreamed that I'd be able to claim those things as part of who I am today. Because as a kid, I couldn't imagine any future for myself as an adult. I didn't know if there was room for someone like me in this world. Too many stories that start out the way that mine did have very different endings, and that's part of the reason why I'm excited to be sharing this story with you today. In America, being trans means having your sense of self questioned every single day. It means that your body is subject to ridicule and debate. It means that in the year 2021, literally just yesterday, the federal government will have heated arguments about your identity and about whether or not I deserve equal protections and equal rights. It means that after you train for hours a day, 7 days a week, and finally make the Olympic trials, that you're called a cheater, or that people say that you don't belong and you shouldn't be competing. It means that you fear for your safety. In 2016, and we know what happened in 2016, with presidential shift of power. In 2016, which was the year that I got sponsored by Nike, crimes against trans people rose by 44%. And if a person is black and trans, or brown and trans, or indigenous, the violence against you is a constant and present and consistent threat. Last year, for example, 91% of the transgender women that were murdered were black. And it's ridiculous that we would even have to have a statistic about how many trans women are being murdered. But the number has been going up and up and up since they've been keeping track. But I'm telling you my story because I think it demonstrates what we all have in common, which is this deep desire, or really like the very basic human need to be seen for who we are, for who we know that we are. And more than that, I think that we have a deep, deep desire to be able to show up in the world authentically. And that might mean the very scary truth of deviating from this sort of false norm that has been presented to us. Because I think if my story proves anything, it's that amazing things can happen if we can support each other to be our most authentic selves. I'm really riding this bike, y'all. All right, so let's move. After I hung up my Wildcat suit and graduated college, I got back into running because while I didn't play sports in college, organized sports, I really missed that team environment. I missed the connections that I had with people. So I started running because it was something I could do straight from my house with very little gear. I didn't have to navigate the weirdness of locker rooms or restrooms, and I didn't have to be on a gendered team. So I bought a bike, not this bike. I bought a different bike, taught myself how to swim, and I won my first triathlon. Thumbs up emoji, cheers. But I didn't want to share my results because I won in the women's category, and this sort of marked the moment where my identity as an athlete intersected with my identity as a person into this sort of massive explosion, and sort of a horrible moment for me that I had to start to think about making a decision. It was becoming pretty clear that trying to fit myself into some sort of existing mold, wearing the pink swim cap, having to tell people I was in women's races, just wasn't working for me. And let me be clear, I love women's sports. There is nothing wrong with women's sports. I'm a champion for women's sports. I just didn't feel like a woman. I didn't think that I belonged. I didn't have the language or terminology to say how I felt when I was a kid. Again, you don't know what you don't know. But once I did have the language, did have the terminology, could articulate my feelings, I was absolutely terrified to tell other people. Because I didn't know how it would impact my professional life or my personal life. I didn't know if I would be safe. I didn't know if I'd be accepted by my family or friends. I didn't know if I could continue to play the sports that I love, the sports that made me feel like I belonged. I didn't know if I'd ever be comfortable in this world. So I leaned into discomfort. Growing up, I didn't have any trans people in my life. I didn't know a person that I could talk to. I didn't see proof that I could exist. I didn't know what my life or my athletic career might look like. So when I began to seriously consider transition, I just told myself one thing over and over again. Just because no one has done it before doesn't mean it can't be done. Just because no one has done it before doesn't mean it can't be done. I didn't see anyone doing what I wanted to do. So I had to take on the very difficult task, not only of doing it, but also teaching myself to believe that I could. I had to take all of the energy that I spent hiding, and I channeled that into my training. It's hot in here. Sweat is actually where I feel the most comfortable. I think sweating is where I feel the most like myself, which is kind of a funny revelation to come to recently. Maybe a little gross revelation, but I, throughout my life, figured out that I felt the most like myself when I was in Little League, under the hot Chicago sun on the hottest days of summer, on like, there's never shade, just sweating in those polyester pants. I felt the most like myself when I was that being beneath the yellow fur, running up and down the stadium, cheering with the fans. I feel the most like myself as an adult when I'm pushing myself to exhaustion. People don't realize how exhausting it is to feel like you don't belong. The first race I ever competed in was, after my transition, was Ironman race in Florida. For those that don't know, Ironman are pretty intense. It's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a full marathon 26.2 mile run at the end. It's a tough day, but in the toughest moments of that race, in the last 10K, after being out there for hours and hours, the only thing that I could think of was, this isn't hard. Living my life every day as a trans person is hard. I signed up for this. In comparison, this is nothing. I think feeling finally like myself opened up an entire new world for me. It made me feel less anxious and less distracted. It helped me not just in my athletic performance, but in every other part of my life. And while it took a little bit of power, a little bit of time maybe, to settle into owning the power of my identity, I think, and I'm still working on it, this is an ongoing process, I think that it all came together to make my world a lot easier to live in. When I came out in 2010, I felt pretty liberated after not being able to tell people for a long time, after not knowing for a long time. But it was the start of another fight. When I decided to try to qualify for Team USA, the International Olympic Committee had a policy that required transgender athletes to have surgery in order to compete in sports in the gender category with which they identify. I thought that was a ridiculous, invasive requirement that I believed was completely unnecessary. And so I decided and knew when I made Team USA that I would need to challenge that rule. But I also knew that I couldn't give them any room to question my ability to compete or that I truly did belong. So I documented my hormone levels for the US Anti-Doping Agency. I volunteered for random drug tests. I got lawyers. Shout out to my lawyers. And I spent hours reading over rules and bylaws, things that none of my other competitors had to do. But it paid off. And in January 2016, the rules were finally updated, which allowed me to prepare to be the first transgender athlete to compete in international competition under the new rules. I think clearing that hurdle for myself and my own athletic career was a pretty big deal. Very few times in my life have I been speechless, but getting this Team USA uniform in the mail was definitely one of them. And I think partly because, again, as a kid, I never would have dreamed that this would have been my future. And it's always nice when that ends up better than what you expected. So doing the accomplishment for my own athletic career was awesome, but I think what I'm most proud of is that I was able to pave this path. Not just, there are a lot of battles left to be fought for trans people in sports, but I'm really proud that this is one that no other athlete will have to fight again. what I've realized is that in being a little more of myself, I can create space for other people to be more fully who they are, even if, or maybe especially if, that is outside of the stereotypes or expectations that this world has created for them. That is absolutely the legacy that I want to leave. All right, so in 2016, I was in ESPN's infamous Body Issue, another history-making moment. For those that don't know or haven't seen it, it's where athletes bear it all, like literally all of it. Not suitable for work, and was definitely the reason that I left my last job after it came out. But when I saw the issue, when it first came out, and I saw myself among the other athletes, I realized that the person I saw in those photos was exactly the person I wanted to be. It was a really big deal. And like, check out me sliding in the naked photos into my presentation. It's hilarious. Gosh, during COVID times here, no one has seen this amazing mustache. No one's seen these naked photos. I'm just giving it all to you today. So when I saw these photos, I really saw myself. And it was this moment where in other pictures, for 30 years of my life almost, I didn't want to be in photos. I didn't want to smile in photos. I didn't want to be seen. And these photos, while so out of my character, because I don't love the spotlight, and when you're naked in a magazine, there's a little spotlight, definitely made me feel like I belonged with those other athletes. And I think that's something that everybody deserves in 2021. It's still something that so many people are reaching for. But I think if my story proves anything, it's that we all have the power to change that. When I was a kid, I felt different only because people told me I was different. I didn't think I was weird. I didn't think I was not who I was supposed to be. I was just me. I was confident. And it wasn't until other people, adults, coaches, teachers, peers, started to tear me down that I thought that I was wrong. That maybe I was doing it wrong. I think if we can make people confident, competitive, driven kids like myself feel like they don't belong and they don't fit in, that we certainly have the power to do the opposite, right? I think I've been able to achieve what I have in sports and in life because of the support of my teammates, of my community, and whether that's in the pool or in the workplace or at home, we don't do it alone. Having teammates who loved me as a person, who cared for me, cared about me, because of who I am, because of what I contribute to the team, even if they didn't exactly know how to support me, what being trans meant, it allowed me to feel safer and more supported. So, in other words, it made me feel like I belonged. But there are still many very big battles that we are fighting as trans people and non-binary people. Right now, this map is from my website, transathlete.com. I track the policies for trans inclusion in sports and also these bad bills that are happening across the country. Every state in red here is a state that wants to ban people like me from playing with their friends in high school and college. Imagine being 14 years old and being told that you have to have someone look at your internal and external reproductive organs in order to play girls volleyball with your friends. It is outrageous. In almost half the country, there are similar bills that would deny healthcare to young trans people, gender-affirming, life-saving healthcare, care that if I didn't receive, probably means that I wouldn't be here. And also, in my neighboring state of Indiana, sorry, Indy crew, but I need you to stand up on this one. Indiana has a bathroom bill right now that would make every person use the bathroom according to their birth certificate. Like, Indiana wants me in the ladies' room, so I'm gonna need you all to act up on that, Indy. But creating a world where my story is possible can really happen with you. I don't have enough time this morning to give you a list of the ways to be the wokest, most effective trans ally to trans people and non-binary people. But I think I can leave you with a quote that guides me and inspires me, along with the idea that you don't know what you don't know. There's this quote that I read every day, and it says, "Be who you needed when you were younger." Because when I was growing up, I didn't see someone who looked like me, and I know that it would have changed my life completely to see someone like me in a Nike ad or on a billboard, to see someone like me wearing a Team USA uniform, holding an American flag, crossing the finish line of an international race. No one should have to live in a world where they look around and they feel like they don't belong. They feel alone, and they can't envision a future for themselves. No one should have to live in a world where they don't know if they are possible, even if they haven't seen it before. I know that we all have this deep desire to feel like we belong. But I think our deeper desire is truly to be able to express ourselves authentically. And we often fear, we have fear because of the stereotypes and the bullshit societal expectations that are placed upon us that prevent us from fully showing up the way we want to. So ask yourself who you needed when you were younger. And recognize that you have the power to be that person, the person that so many young people still need. A person who can make our world one with more compassion and more justice, and one where everyone gets to play and live as themselves. We all have this incredible ability to influence the people around us simply by being ourselves. We all have the ability to influence the people around us simply by being ourselves. But the challenge is leaning into that discomfort and reminding ourselves that it is possible, that we are possible, and remembering that in being a little more yourself, you can create space for other people to be more fully who they are.